The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello, it's Mark Kelly here, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus International, and you're listening to our Alldus podcast as part of our ServiceNow podcast series. And I'm very, very happy to welcome onto the show Robert Elliott. Robert is the VP of ServiceNow Services at Optimum Healthcare. Robert, thank you very much for being a guest on the show. And I know you're up early to be a podcast guest in the US, so thanks in advance for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to chat with you today, Mark.
Robert, for people who don't know much, a little bit about you, tell us a little bit of how you got into the world of ServiceNow and your journey to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in a bit of a web development background. I did some ASP.NET, classic ASP, C Sharp, that type of thing. And I floundered around a little bit. And I don't know that I could have told you this at the time, but I think that it was really because I was doing very technical work, but I wasn't really tied into the whole life cycle of addressing a challenge. And so I floundered around a bit, and I was actually working in a Whole Foods bakery when I decided I wanted to advance my IT career and get back into things. Great job, by the way. But I moved back in and I was working with a recruiter, and they linked me up with a partner that at the time was looking to hire additional talent and build up a local office where I was located. I interviewed in a coffee shop, and the director asked me, what do you think about a career in IT service management? And me at the time, I didn't know what I was talking about. I was like, yeah, all right, that sounds great. And so, but when I got into it and I started doing work with ServiceNow, the partner got in early on the scene, and we got to work with a lot of great, very well-known, significant organizations. And I was able to see, okay, I'm not just doing technical work where I'm doing an application build, I'm getting into the code, I'm building a class, whatever it might be. As fun as that is, I was able to tie it from, all right, I'm here having this conversation with you about a business challenge that you're facing. I'm going to help you to develop a technology solution to support it. I'm going to actually build that solution, and we're talking about a smaller partner here, so you're full scale across the board. And then I'm going to actually be a part of making that go live and seeing some of the outcomes and the impact of what I've just built. And so I fell in love with ServiceNow because of my ability to impact and to see the impact of the work that I was doing with the tool. And I think that's one of the coolest things about it.
I love your background of bakery because there is so many analogies you could put into the world of ServiceNow with baking, and you talk about the impact. And the lovely thing about when you kind of get all the ingredients together, you do it the right way, you follow the process, and you do it as per the steps. It's kind of repeatable, and you kind of experience, and then you come into the world of ServiceNow and you work with all the different stakeholders and you kind of craft those recipes, and then you're looking for that impact because you see that end result. And obviously these implementations can take quite a bit longer than your average bakery, but I've got quite a nice analogy in that there, so I'm thinking about that for the future.
Yeah, I actually kind of love it myself now that you dive into that. I'm thinking we get the par-baked loaves from the regional bakery. They come in, maybe that's you working in App Engine Studio and you've got a template that you're working from, and then we put it in the oven and finish it off, or maybe you're developing to your specific organization's use case. It's not bad. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I'm liking this. I'm thinking some new marketing material for you guys.
Mhm.
This could work well. Tell us a little bit about kind of understanding the problems that you're trying to help solve when you're working, engaging with customers, and kind of staying on point that you're really focusing on that return on investment, and then kind of helping people kind of implement the strategic objectives that they have, because it can be quite easy to fall off track.
Yeah, that's very true. A lot of the work that we do when we're going in to work with a new organization is tied into helping them to get the full value of what they're licensing from the platform. So, with the talent shortage going on right now, that doesn't just impact development staff, it impacts folks who can come in and look at a program and have a strategic vision for it and align that with the strategic objectives of the organization. So I think one of the first things that is important to do is to be able to articulate some of those strategic objectives and what you're looking to achieve from an organizational perspective, so that you can then tie that back into what you're doing with ServiceNow, and it's not just technology for technology's sake. Um, so we'll go in and work with an organization to help to align those two things, to look at all the powerful features they're getting from ServiceNow with the licensing that they have, and to really build up more vitality into a program and align that with those objectives and start showing value and keeping it all measurable along the way. I think that's really key. I think a lot of folks talk about that, but having well-defined metrics up front, so what KPIs are you looking to measure against, tracking those along the way, and being able to tell that story of success and then help to grow upon it. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the innovative space with ServiceNow, whether it's digging into what you can do with virtual agent or some of the ML capabilities and the AI functionality that's being baked in. But what you have to do first really ties into a foundation and having a really healthy foundation in place. So that's one of the earliest things that we like to do with organizations, is to get them healthy and build upon something solid.
Yeah, and then when you're actually going back and you're showing kind of return on investment, when you got something that's measured against return on investment, becomes a lot easier with kind of KPIs, and then you can build that foundation up further to kind of looking at virtual agents or leveraging ML, and having that kind of strong kind of core is very, very important. So we talked a little bit about the kind of challenges, or trying to make sure you're staying on the right course. Could you maybe some case studies that come to mind where you're kind of helping customers, and what was the challenge? What were some of the return on investments that you worked through?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the recent ones that we've had that I like a lot ties into access. It's a pretty common use case, being able to have a consolidated access system. But I'll tell you, every healthcare organization I go into, either they recently did or they still do have a homegrown access solution that they built on some legacy technology 15 years ago, and they're still struggling with it, and everybody wants to get out of it. So we were able to work with them in order to pull all that into the platform, and then to be able to leverage IntegrationHub in order to automate quite a few of those. So I think there were 30, I'm going to mess up the number. There were 30 plus applications that were able to leverage IntegrationHub in order to automate those access request fulfillments. Saved, I want to say, 137 hours for the first quarter, and I think that that'll continue to increase over time. And I think really that only includes the fulfiller aspect and not even the customer side of that when you're talking about faster time to value and the downstream impact on your users, because that's key to all this, right? Is how users perceive the program and how their experience is in service delivery, and then maybe ideally their lack of perception of the program, because all they see is them getting services faster.
And that's really nice, because 137 hours, because, and that's probably a starting point that people can actually go, okay, well, that's tangible. What does that enable us to do? What can we actually do? What is the potential for this for other things as well? So it's really, really good to look at that. When you look at some of the interesting things coming down the track, ServiceNow have purchased 10 plus companies in last year. They've been busy kind of getting the technology under the hood and integrating into ServiceNow for the next gen. What are you most excited about, or is kind of future gazing from what can happen in the future?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in two ways. So the first is the true spirit of your question, and then I'm going to step a little bit into industry for it as well. So I think that some of the more fundamental capabilities of that AI type, machine learning type technology, when it comes to the process optimization aspect, are going to be highly valuable. Those are fairly early on in their integration into the platform, but being able to, in an automated fashion, take a workflow, or take a process and identify where is this holding up, what are our bottlenecks, and then tactically work to remediate those. When you've got limited time, limited developer hours, and you have to really focus that effort, I think that those types of things help you to do that more efficiently and more effectively. So, if you look at this thing from above at your factory floor in a digital sense, where's all the product getting held up on the line, and how can we move it along a little bit faster? And that kind of capability and the integration of those technologies into the platform are going to help with that. I do think that will expand. I will say too, though, for better and for worse, because it carries both sides. Within healthcare IT, we tend to lag adoption a little bit when it comes to some of the more bleeding edge technologies. And so what I see coming and happening right now really is the broad adoption of enterprise service management and the shift of strategy from IT to the enterprise. So, we've all been talking about this for years, and it feels like maybe that's a little bit behind the curve, but because you're seeing a lot of executives within within healthcare organizations right now getting the promotion to chief digital and information officer from chief information officer and other transformation related titles. And that's showing a shift in thinking to, all right, we've really got to get with it. There are disruptors coming into the market who aren't traditional healthcare provider organizations. There's a lot happening, and we've got to innovate and adapt as well. And with that is coming a view of, okay, what are other organizations doing? What do I need to do in order to not just improve my IT foundation, but to better facilitate the delivery of services with technology across the platform? And that's translating into, all right, let's get the house in order in IT. Let's look at some of the traditional areas that are the next step, like HR. But then let's get into things like clinical engineering, which sometimes rolls up to IT, but it's a much closer to patient impact. You're talking, how do I service and support the things that are actually out on the floor tied into patient care, your MRI machines, your infusion pumps, all that sort of thing. And then that takes, your next step there is facilities and tying into that aspect, because those teams are often closely paired. And then it really just expands from there into some of the areas that, when considered in isolation, maybe you wouldn't have purchased ServiceNow to support those use cases, but if you're looking at a holistic solution, they come on board, and you're really developing something strategic at that point.
Yeah, I think it's a really good, because you want to get up to a strong foundation, but then you also need to be really mindful for those disruptors that are coming down the track, and what are you going to do differently? What's your game plan? Like, how are we going to leverage this and take it to the next level? How do we continue to wow our internal and our external stakeholders? And it's a constant question, right? The kind of the cheese is always moving.
That's right. But I think you point out one of the most important things there is that game plan, being aware of that and having a plan for how you will address it with the information you've got right now, and then as it adapts and changes as you move along, as it inevitably will, right?
So, Robert, Ghislaine Johnson, VP at UHC, had a really interesting question, and I've got to pose it to yourself now. What is your enterprise application integration plan? And really, she was asking, being that kind of mindful of applications integrations at enterprise level, and where do you start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So within healthcare IT, you have the addition of your clinical applications on top of a lot of the traditional administrative and other types of systems you might be integrating with in another organization. Every industry's got its own little pieces of the pie, right? Or of the puzzle, and those are ours, at least a very significant one. So I think with that in mind, there are a few nuances. The first is having a strategy. It seems that a lot of organizations just kind of fall into it, right? So they'll have a use case to address, and then they'll have another one, and then number 17 comes, and we've just cobbled something together and haven't really taken a holistic view of everything, and developed a strategy for how we're going to approach it. So number one, have a strategy for the way that you're going to address your integrations. Which systems are going to be key within that? What are the models that you're going to use for building out those integrations, and what is that going to look like? Is ServiceNow going to kind of be the glue that holds things together? Is it going to be an ancillary part of the picture? Hopefully not, but look at it from that point of view. When you can leverage pre-built integrations by ServiceNow, there's a lot of great stuff that comes with IntegrationHub at this point, and if you don't have to own it and maintain it, that addresses some of your capacity challenges that you'll face down the road. I would throw out there, be extra cautious and evaluative. Is that a word? Evaluate any third-party integrations that you bring in. There's some really good ones out there. Some third-party vendors have built really strong ones, but there are some others that are not. So definitely give those a strong eye, strong consideration, but a strong evaluation too. And then the last thing I'd include in there is to think up front about both the security aspects, and I'm thinking of protected health information and those types of things when we're talking about integration with any clinical systems or data or systems that would have any clinical data. But think about the user experience impact of your security decisions as well. So if perhaps you're considering like a column level type encryption versus a platform encryption, and maybe the platform encryption carries a little bit more cost at this point, but as you scale the integrations and the sourcing of data within your system, it's going to have more need across different areas where you'll have to keep adding additional fields that are going to be encrypted. And so that doesn't look so great over time. And there's some experience challenges, whereas the platform encryption supports you much more broadly and gives a better experience. And maybe down the road, the cost isn't a huge challenge relative to the value you get. So just think those things through upfront rather than finding yourself 17 integrations in and having to backpedal.
As basic as it sounds, I just love the point of have a strategy.
Yeah.
Really purposeful. Rather than at the end or suddenly you're in it, you have a strategy, and it's a good foundation. So, Robert, over to you. Our next question for our upcoming guest, and what is it?
Yeah, I would like to know what our next guest thinks would be a strategic acquisition for ServiceNow to make. So, don't necessarily have to name a particular company, but the business that they're in, the nature of the technology that they're building, if that's what it happens to be. What would you like to see ServiceNow acquire as they expand the portfolio of applications and solutions they offer?
Brilliant question. I can't wait to my next guest answers it. I'll be straight over to you with the answer. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been chatting with Robert Elliott. Robert's the VP of ServiceNow Services at Optimum Healthcare. And Robert has been giving us a little bit of an overview about his journey into the world of ServiceNow, which I believe he came from a bakery background. And we talked a little bit about managing the stakeholders, giving them a really, really good experience and the opportunity for return on investment, some of the challenges to be mindful for strategic implementation. And we talked a little bit about future gazing of ServiceNow and what we can expect. And then we got to answer to Lean Johnson's question regarding enterprise applications and integrations. Robert, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.